Okay, I want to begin the class with saying together a few kapitlach Tehillim for our brothers and sisters in Eretz Yisrael, for all of the wounded and their families, especially for all of our soldiers, and of course for all those who are in captivity, hostages, and for all of the families of the slain, and for all of our brothers and sisters, and for all of the Jewish people in Eretz Yisrael and the whole world. So let's begin. We'll say Kapitel Pei Gimel. Actually, you have it for those who are sitting on this side. You could just look up. They have a sign with it, if you want. Those who are sitting on that side, you see there's a sign. Or in the back, most of the Siddurim have a Tehillim in the back, so you can get one. I'll say loud and everybody is welcome to join. Pei Gimel. Shir mizmar la'asaf, Elohim al dami lach al techrash val tishkeit el. Ki hine yevecha ye'amayu no misanecha nasu rosh. Al amcha yarimu soid v'yisyatzu al tzfonecha. Amru l'chu v'nachechide migoy v'lo yizocher shem Yisrael oid. Ki noyatzu lev yachdav alecha b'ris yichreisu. Ahalei edom v'yishmaelim, moyav v'hagrim, Gval va'amayin va'amalek pleshes im yoshvei tzar. Gam asher nilva imam hayu zroya livnei loit sela. Asela hem kemidyan kesisra kiyavin benachal kishain. Nishmedu ve'ein dayer hayu daimin la'adama. Shiseimai nediveimai ka'oire v'chizev u'chizevach u'chitzalmuna kol mesichemai. Asher amru nir shalanu es na'isa lehim. Elohai shiseimai chagalgal kekash lefnei ruach. Ka'esh tivar yar, u'chelava talayit harim, kein tirdefeim b'sarecho v'sofascha savalim, malif neim koloin v'vakshu shimcha adinai, yevoshu v'yibalu adei ad v'yachberu v'yevedu, v'yedu kiyata shimcha adinai levadecha, elyain al kol haaretz. This could have been written a few weeks ago, this kapitel. If you have a Tehillim in English, it's worthwhile to look at the translation. Kuf Chav Bais, Kapitel Kuf Chav Bais. Shir Hamalois LeDavid Samachti Ba'imrim Li Beis Adonai Nelech. Oim Dois Hoyer Agleinu B'Sharayich Yerushalayim Yerushalayim Habnuya Kir Shechubra LaYachdav. Shesham Alu Shvatim Shifte Ya Edus Li Yisrael Lahoidos L'Shem Adonai. Ki Shama Yashvu Chisos LeMishpait Kisos LeVeis David. Shalu Shloim Yerushalayim Yishlayu Ayavayich. Yehi shalom bechelach shalva bar menesayich leman achai v'neyai adabra na shalom bach leman Bais Adonai Eloheinu avaksha toiv lach. And we'll do one last one, which they also have on the wall hanging. Kuf mem Bais. Kuf mem Bais. That's what's there, right? Kuf mem Bais. Maskil leDavid b'Yosef ama'aret tefillah. Koili el Adonai Ezek, Koili el Adonai Eschanan, Eshboich lefonav Sichitz, Arasi lefonav Agid, Bisatif alai Ruchi, Vati Yadata Nisivasi, Ba'irach zu ahalich Tamnu Fachli, Habeit Yamin Urei, Ve'en li Makir, Avad Bonis Mimeni, En Derish Lenavshi, Za'akti elech Adonai, Amarti Ata Machsi, Chelki Beretz HaChaim, Hakshive el Rinasi, Kidaloisi Moed, Hatzilei Nimireit, Fekiyamtsu Mimeni, Hoitzia mimazger nafshi lahoides hashmecha biyachtiru tzadikim ki sigmail aloi. And the last kapitel of Tehillim is Kuf Nun. Hallelujah, hallelujah, el bekotche, hallelujah, b'kiya uzay, hallelujah, b'gvuraysav, hallelujah, karev gudle, hallelujah, b'seker shofar, hallelujah, b'nevel v'chiner, hallelujah, b'sefer machal, hallelujah, b'minim v'ogav, hallelujah, b'tziltzilei shama, hallelujah, b'tziltzilei sruah, koila neshama, tahallel, ya hallelujah. There's one source sheet on the bima, please take. There's more copies still? Yeah, okay. Okay, I want to welcome everybody who's here physically, everybody who's here virtually. I want to especially make a special welcome for Brandy Hershkowitz, who's here. And as you know, it's not so easy for her to come here every single week. But thank you, Brandy, for coming. And you add so much light to our class. So thank you for being a pillar of light and radiance. It means a lot that you come here and you make the effort. Today's class is dedicated by Rabbi Yecheskel Gutfriend in memory of his dear father, Reb David ben Yecheskel Alevi, in tribute to his yahrzeit on the 15th day of Mar Cheshvan. Tehei nishmasei tzrura b'tzrar hachaim. May he be an eternal source of blessing and inspiration to you and the whole family and all of the Jewish people. Thank you so much. There was a famous expression of the Baal HaTanya, of the Alter Rebbe. He said once in Yiddish, "Medaf leben mit der Zeit," which means you have to live with the times. And they asked, what's the meaning? Of course, it wasn't you have to live with the times. Some Jews, it meant once upon a time to live with the New York Times. I don't think it means that. I don't know if it ever meant that. All the news that's fit to print. And he explained living with the times means living with the Parsha of the week. The Parsha of the week means living with the times. Why? Because since it's the Parsha that by divine providence was designated to read that week, so it means somehow it captures the soul of the week. It captures the neshama and the messages and directives. It's a blueprint, a roadmap for the events, for the experiences, for the voyages and journeys of every Jew individually and the Jewish people collectively through the week. So to live with the times means to tune in to the soul of the time, to the energy of the time, which is captured that week in that parsha. There are three scenes in Parshas Vayera that I want to address with you today in this class. They're all in the same parsha. 3 scenes, 3 different stories in a parsha, in a portion loaded with quite intense stories. And I think each one quite relevant. Maybe on more than one level. The first one is in the Parshas Vayera, is the parsha with the story of Lot and his family being saved from the destruction of Sodom and Amorah, Sodom and Gomorrah. And let's just remember the context. The context is that 2 people, 2 messengers, 2 angels come to Sodom, where Lot, the nephew of Avraham Avinu, has settled years earlier and has done quite well for himself. When Avraham asked him to move on and find his own niche in life because it wasn't working out between their shepherds, so Lot chose to become a citizen of Sodom. He did so well, the Torah says, "V'Lot Yoshev b'shar Sodom." Lot was sitting in the portal of Sodom, which was the place where the judiciary, where the court, the Supreme Court, would sit at the entrance to the city. That was the traditional place of the gathering of the Supreme Court. And as Rashi says, quoting the Medrash, that Lot was nominated as one of the Supreme Court justices of Sodom, whatever the system of justice they had, but he was nominated as a shofet, which means he didn't only move there, but he really integrated. He made it to the top. He made it to the top echelons of the community. Later we will see that he had 2 daughters who married inhabitants of Sodom. He had sons-in-law of Sodom. It means they integrated socially, they integrated on a family level. They were married with the people there. He was now a judge, a respected citizen. And these 2 people come to him. He takes them to the house. He feeds them. This he had ingrained in his DNA from his uncle Avraham Avinu and his aunt Sarah. Of course, his father Haran was Avram's younger brother, and Avraham has taken with him on all their journeys. His father has died earlier, as the Torah says at the end of Parshas Noach. So, and at some point in the story, the people of Sodom who loathed guests and hospitality, gather around the house. They demand from Lot to give the guests out. Lot pleads with them not to do it. He pleads and pleads. And they told him, "We're going to afflict you even more than them." In the famous words they say, the Torah says, they say to him, "Echad balagur," you're here as a stranger, you're here as an alien. You're a ger, you're a foreigner. Vayishpat shafet, and you're going to come tell us what to do. You're going to come judge us. And that's when the angels revealed to him that this entire city is about to face destruction because of the evil and abhorrent immorality that has taken root in Sodom, and they urge him to leave and escape together with his wife and his children and any children that he has around the city. At some point, Lot goes to his daughters and sons-in-law, who are already living out of the house, to plead with them to leave. And the Torah says, he seemed like a joke, a gesture, a comedian in the eyes of his son-in-law when he told them this place is going to be destroyed. This was paradise. Sodom was paradise on every level. Affluence, independence, aesthetics, a beautiful, the picket fence community. Everybody was on their own. You worried about your own lawn and nobody bothered you. Live and let live. Shali shali v'shalach shalach. And now he's warning of pending destruction. It's a very dramatic word. It wasn't like an argument. It was no philosophical or theological debate. You're a joker. You're just a joker. They just laughed him off like some ridiculous, strange fellow who was who was just a mockery. And of course they refused to leave. The last moment, and this is the pasuk that we're going to focus on, Vayera Perek Yutes pasuk Tezayin, Genesis 19:16. Vayisma ma, as the two messengers are urging Lot to leave, it's already close to dawn. Vayisma ma. Vayisma ma is a very powerful word in Lashon Kodesh, in the Holy Tongue, which means he hesitated, he procrastinated. In Yiddish, for those who learned in Yiddish schools, it's verzamt, right? Verzamt, okay. Versäumt, okay. That depends. Hungary, Lithuania, Poland, Galicia, Russia. We're not going to get into the politics at the moment. Verzamt. The bottom line is, he tarried. We have in the Ani Mamin, right? Va'afal pisha yisma meya. Even though he may tarry, it may take a long time. So vayisma ma is, in Yiddish you call it akratze. It's a gekratzt. He procrastinated, if you will. Vayachziku ha'anoshim biyadoi uviyad ishtoi v'yad shnei b'noisav b'chemlas Hashem Allah v'yitzi'u v'yinichu m'chutz l'yer. So the two men, the two angels, hold on to his hand. They actually chap him, they schlep him. And the hand of his wife, and the hand of his two daughters who were with him in the house, with the compassion of Hashem on him, and they literally transport him. They take him out and his family and place him outside of the city where they are saved. Of course, he is given the commandment not to look back, to leave and not to look back. His wife looks back, and the Torah says she becomes a pillar of salt. I want to focus on something. We have focused on it once, I think, in the past, perhaps, maybe in other class, I don't know if in the women's class. But it's extremely powerful and relevant when you think about this, and to see how sometimes such profound, acute, and relevant messages are contained not in a sentence, not in part of a sentence, not even in a word, not even in a letter, but actually in a musical note. As you know, the whole Tanakh has what's called Tamei HaMikra. In Yiddish, they're called trop, musical cantillations, with which each verse and parsha is read. Now, it's not so easy because in the Sefer Torah, there's you don't have any of these notes, so they have to be memorized. But the Balkaida, the one who reads the Torah that's on Shabbos or Yom Tov in the middle of the week, reads it with these trop that are ancient. Some even say they come from Moshe Rabbeinu, Tamei HaMikra from Moshe Rabbeinu, which means this is part of the Torah Shabbal Peh, part of the oral tradition, how to read a pasuk. And each word has a different musical note with which it is read during the reading of the Torah. In fact, the whole Tanakh has trop, Tamei HaMikra. If you read, for example, Sefer Tehillim, it's not known today what the music is, but each word has trop, has Tamei HaMikra. Some of them are very, very common. Some are very rare. One of the most rare notes is called Shalas. Shalas literally means a chain. And this Vayisma has a shalshelis. If you see on top of Vayisma, it looks like a zigzag, you see? On the top of the mem of Vayisma, it's called shalshelis. It's a note so rare it's found only 4 times in the entire Chumash. Only 4 times. In Parshas Vayera, this one is the first. The next one will be next week, Chayesara. The third one will be Vayeshev. The last one will be Parshas Tzav. And that's it. Only 4 times on 4 words. And the musical note is a very interesting one because it actually represents procrastination and tarrying and hesitating to the point that it sounds like the person is stuck unable to make a decision, a clear, decisive decision moving forward. So this is how it's read. Vayismama, and some people even do that depends again on the community. And then he goes, Vayachziku hanashim biyadayu v'yad ishtayu v'yad shnei v'nesav b'chemas Hashem alav v'yetziu v'yinechu michutz la'ir. So those are more common musical cantillations. But the first one is extremely rare. And one of the earliest commentators on Chumash Rabbi Yosef Parshas just articulated it, obviously justly, that this is a note that represents what we call today in English ambivalence. Rabbi Jonathan Sachs in an essay, Olav Shalom, he wrote, in Hebrew there's no word for ambivalence. In modern Hebrew they have ambivalentiyut, I think. But that's modern Hebrew. There's no real word for ambivalence. The closest is Eliyahu Hanavi speaking to the Jewish people, and he turns to them in Malachim in Kings 1:17 Yud Zayin Daf Torah of Kisisa Ad Mosei Atem Poischem Al Shtei HaSeifim. How long will you be what we would call yeah, how long will you dance at 2 weddings? Well, if you live in New York, you dance at 9 weddings sometimes in one night, and another 3 bar mitzvahs after the Pidyon HaBen before the Upshernish in middle of the Vachnacht. Okay, it used to be Brooklyn, now even Monsey, Baruch Hashem, Matan stuff, Merviyeh Chasana. But at Masat, you have to decide which wedding you're going to attend. I know it's a hard choice. How long will you jump from one column to another column, what we call in English sitting on the fence? You have to decide. If you believe in idolatry, so go to idolatry. And if you believe in Hashem, Eliyahu Hanavi says, go to Hashem. That's the closest expression we have in Lashon Kodesh. We don't have a word for ambivalence. We don't have a word for it, but we have a musical note for it. And the musical note is shalshelis. If you even look at the zigzag, what's the zigzag? The zigzag is I'm going in one direction, but then I'm pulled back in the opposite direction. But then I'm like, no, I've got to go to this. So I go to the other direction, but then I'm pulled back and I'm pulled back. I can't craft a decisive decision to move forward because I'm paralyzed by something. There's an emotional paralysis that is holding me back from making that move. So the very word and the music are very aligned with each other. And that's why you hear this person is, which is actually a person is debating, a person is thinking, reflecting, which is a very good and decent and worthwhile human trait. I shouldn't be rash and impulsive and impetuous. But then I'm like, okay, that's a good question. No. Now it's time for resolution. But I'm like, in the old days of the record players, you remember when there was a scratch? You remember when there was a scratch on the record or later on the CD, and the same stanza is, or the same note is being repeated literally again and again and again. And then in some cases, some people concluded, which is let me just go to sleep, or let me just go eat, or let me just go do whatever. I'm not going to deal with it. So it's like a conclusion to this shalshelis, to this sense of stuckness. Why did Lot hesitate? Vayismama, why did Lot hesitate? Rashi says he was very hesitant to leave without his wealth. He had to run away in a moment's notice. He couldn't prepare. What about his computer? What about his database? What about the family albums? What about all of the investments? What about all the furniture? What about all of the investment he put into his home? All of his money, all of his assets? He's just running away. So that's on the basic, most literal level. I'll just mention in fast. I'll mention swiftly the other three places where you have this note, because it's fascinating how in each one of these places somebody is stuck. The next week is a Chayesara. Avraham Avinu sends his faithful servant, the Torah doesn't give a name, but tradition says it was Eliezer, to find a match for his son Yitzchak. And he sends him away from the Holy Land all the way to Haran, which is Mesopotamia, northern Iraq or southern Turkey in today's geography. And over there he wants him to find a young woman for his son Yitzchak. And Eliezer takes the mission, he makes an oath to his father-in-law, and he goes to the well. The well in those days was the central meeting place because everybody needed water. This is before the Industrial Revolution. You don't have sinks in your house. Everybody needs water, so you go to the well, the public wellspring from which everybody is there. So that's the place where people meet. That's the place where people socialize. You know at some point you're going to meet somebody there because everybody needs water for their homes, for their children, for themselves, for their livestock, etc. And Eliezer prays. And Vayomer, he says to Hashem, and he says, please do kindness with my master and allow me to find the right person. And then when he identifies those characteristics that he's looking for in the young future wife for Yitzchak, somebody who will offer water to him and his camels, etc. On the Vayomer, he says to Hashem, please help me, there's a Shalas. Vayomer, and it's very strange. Vayomer, the word Vayomer is frequent in Torah. It's one of the most common words. And he said, it never has a Shalas. Obviously something was holding him back. Indeed, Chazal, our sages, pointed out that Eliezer was not so happy with this arrangement. Part of him wanted to do what Avraham said, but part of him wanted it shouldn't work out because he had a daughter. He had his own daughter, and he wanted his daughter to marry Yitzchak, and he thought it was a wonderful shidduch. So he was asking for it to happen, but another part of him was asking that it doesn't happen. So there was this shalshelas. This confusion inside of Eliezer. Do I really want this? This is what Avraham wants. Avraham thinks this is the best for Yitzchak. But really inside he had another agenda. Vayomer. The third shalshelas is equally dramatic and perhaps even more, and that's in Parshas Vayeshev, in the story of Yosef. Yosef is sold as a slave by his brothers to an Egyptian minister, Potiphar, and we all know the story. Potiphar's wife takes a liking to Yosef and does not stop pleading with him to betray his own morality and her own morality and be together with him. Vayimayin, it says Yosef refuses. The Vayimayin has another shalshalas. Vayimayin, he refuses. And again, Chazal say this was not simple. He was 17 years old. He had nobody in his life. He finally found a home in Potiphar, and Potiphar's husband, Potiphar nominated him to be completely in charge, to be the CFO of his operations. He loved him so much, he cherished him. This woman, Chazal say, didn't only plead with him, but she warned him and threatened him. And the worst threats that she gave him, to the point that one day, he surrendered, he succumbed, if not for the image of his father, which saved him at the last moment. It did not come, he refused, but it did not come without profound struggle. Vayimayin. The last one is the least apparent. It's in Parshas Tzav, Vayishchat. Moshe Rabbeinu slaughters the animal in the new Mishkan. But when you look deep into it, you understand that this is the last time Moshe would do the Avodah in the Mishkan, because when the tabernacle was created and erected, for the first 7 days were days of training, called Shivas Yemei HaMiluyim, from the 23rd day of Adar till Rosh Chodesh Nis. And those days, Moshe was the Kohen Gadol. He was the high priest, and he trained Aaron. He trained his brother. He trained his nephews. He is the one who did the work in the Mishkan. The last time he does the work, the last day, Vayishchat, the last time he shechts, he offers this animal, there's a Vashalshelas. The next time, it'll be passed on to Aaron. So when you read it, when you start reading it and you understand, there was a very profound experience in Moshe Rabbeinu's heart. Number one, this is the last time he gets to do it. And number two, did he actually train Aaron well? Did he fulfill his duty as the teacher, as the mentor? So it comes with a very profound sense of question, of hesitation, of introspection, of reflection. What was Lot so hesitant about? Why did the Vayisma deserve such a Shalas? What made him stuck? When you see the context of the story, one can understand it very well. And again, I'm grateful to Rabbi Jonathan Sachs, Zechrona Livracha, who in an essay articulated it beautifully. And the main point is this. Lot has chosen to abandon his uncle Avraham. He just didn't like his lifestyle. The shepherds didn't get along with Avram's shepherds. And Avraham told Lot, he says, listen, we're brothers. Let's not fight. We shouldn't be together living opposite lives and undermining each other. If you want to go to the right, I will go to the left. If you want to go to the left, I will go to the right. This is the beginning of Parshas Lech Lecha. And that's when Lot leaves Avraham Avinu. Vayisa Lot mikedem. As Rashi says, he told Avraham, he said, I don't want Avram and I don't want Avram's God. This life was just not for him. And he invested his life in Sdom. Sdom was a metropolitan. Sdom was affluent. Sdom was the symbol of success. And Lot made it. He made it in Sdom. And he made it there for many years, as I said, to the point that he was nominated as a Supreme Court justice in Sdom. Imagine for a little Jewish kid. I don't know if you want to call him a Jewish kid, but he certainly grew up in the house of the first Jews. This was an achievement. Not only did he move to Sdom and he found some little apartment and he was a nachschlepper, he was a parasite. No. He made it to the top echelons of society, and then his daughters marry out. What else can you ask for? Full, successful integration. Suddenly, on this night, this beautiful life that he imagined for himself and his family starts to crumble. When he speaks to the people, and he's their judge, he's one of their leaders, he's one of their legislators, he's one of their thinkers, he's one of the most prominent citizens of Sdom, and he asks them, he says, I have two people here. Don't bother them. They don't just say, you're breaking policy, we're going to do what we want. They turn to him and they say, don't forget who you are. Ha'echad balagur vayishbet shavet. You're a foreigner. You're a parasite. Or in words that would become popular later, you're a dirty Jew. Go back home. Don't come here and tell us how to live our home. Lot didn't expect this. I'm not from that world. I'm from your world. I invested everything in your world. I did so well. I followed all the laws. I integrated so beautifully. I'm an asset for you. You're an asset for me. I thought we have become one. I thought we're brothers. At that moment, a moment of truth, Lot realized that at this moment they looked at him and they said, you're not one of us. Go back home. We're going to hurt you more than we hurt your guests. Deep down, we have no trust to you. And then when he comes to his sons-in-law and he pleads with them and he said, it's time to leave. They look at this man. He thought his sons-in-law respected him. They were proud to take his daughters. And they say, you're just a joker. You're a weird person. You suffer from insanity. You're not part of our community. The two people look at Lot and said, it's time to say goodbye. It's time to say goodbye to him. There's no future here. There's no future for you. There's no future. This is a destroyed place. It's been already destroyed. Morally, it's been a destroyed place. This moment, Vayisma ma, he hesitates. We can relate to his hesitation. This is the hesitation that so many Jews experienced in Germany in the 1930s. We've invested our lives there. We have become sometimes more German than Germans. I was once in Connecticut in a shul, and I met the Holocaust survivor. He was a German Jew. I still remember, his name was Mr. Oyebach, Allah Shalom. But he survived in a unique way. The Nazis killed his father and they sent back to his house an urn of ashes. They cremated him. He says, one day we get a gift, an urn of ashes. They said, this is your father's ashes. His mother managed to get papers for him. He was a kid. That he was an Aryan. And he lived in Berlin. Imagine, in Berlin, he lived as a Jew during the Holocaust. So he was part of Berlin German culture. He was telling me about the Hitler Jugend parades and all of they would make parades at Hitler's birthday in April and all these things. And he was part of it. He was part of it until somebody finally revealed his identity. But that's how he survived. And as he was talking to me, he was quoting poems from Goethe and Schiller. These are some of the great German poets. And I could see this twinkle in his eye. And I said, you're saying these poems these poems with so much passion. He says, yeah, this is the sweetness of my youth. This is the school I grew up in. I still have this deep feeling for where I grew up. You know, and it was such a struggle for so many Jews who did so well in Germany. They assimilated, they intermarried. Many of them converted in the 1800s. They have joined the society and successfully integrated. Some of the greatest musicians, people like Felix Mendelssohn. It was Moshe Mendelssohn's grandson. He was considered one of the greatest musicians in Germany. His father, they converted to Christianity. Heinrich Heine was one of the greatest writers and poets. Another Jew, Heinrich Heine, also converted to Christianity. I'm just giving a few examples in terms of academia and science and politics. The foreign minister of Germany after the First World War was a Jew. What was his name? Very interesting story. They killed him. They assassinated him in 1922. I forgot his name. But in any case, and now suddenly, it's hard to believe that this whole world crumbled. Many times Jews in different countries, they felt they were so integrated, and then at a moment of truth, you're just a foreigner, you're a parasite, you're a cancerous tumor. Go back home. This is the moment of Yishmael. On one hand, he knows that they're right. He wasn't stupid. And he had some of the spark of Avraham Avinu. That's why he sacrificed himself to have these guests. On the other hand, can you look back at 50 years and say it was a mistake? It was a dismal mistake. It was such an error of judgment. I was blinded by some glorious, intoxicating passion that turned out to be worthless and futile. Mamish worth bupkis. Vayismama. And the angels tell him, don't look back. Don't look back. Because looking back means you're still stuck. Even after you leave, you're still stuck. You can't let go. In psychology in the 1950s, there was a phrase that was coined, I believe, by two Jewish psychologists, cognitive dissonance. You know what cognitive dissonance is? That's the Shalas. Cognitive dissonance is it's very hard for a person to deal with conflict. You have two opposing truths, and they're both true in your mind. It's very hard to live with that. And therefore you have to bend one side. You have to go into some form of denial. We can't live with cognitive dissonance. Our brains want to make sense out of things. And this is what Lot faced his whole life. He believed in so much of his life. He believed so much in Sodom. He contributed to it. He built it. And now there was nothing left for him. They hated him. They despised him. They loathed him. It's very hard to be able just to shift. So he's glaring at this contradiction. He gets frozen. He gets stuck. I don't know what to do. Vayismama. And they mamish have to take him and schlep him out. And they tell him, don't look back. His wife, who probably came from Sodom, looked back. This is what's called postcognitive dissonance. Even after I am forced into one trajectory, I still look back. I'm still stuck. I'm still paralyzed. And the result of that is I become salt. Psychologically, that is a very profound experience. The ability to let go is not an easy thing to do. Think about it psychologically and emotionally. Sometimes I can hold on to something for so many years, hold on to pain, hold on to resentment, and for good reason. I don't want to let go because maybe this pain is the only thing that I have as a witness to what happened. If I resent you, it means I still have dignity. For me to let go, I feel I'm sacrificing my identity. What do I have left? Light doesn't want to let go. The only thing he has is this procrastination, this belief, this faith. Maybe Sdom is still a good place. Maybe the angels were joking. Maybe there is a future in Sdom. Maybe it won't be destroyed. Maybe his sons-in-law are right. He should laugh from himself. He has internalized the laughter. He has internalized the shame. The challenge is, if I don't let go, I become salty. I become salty. I become bitter. My life is now filled with bitterness, even if I don't recognize it as such, because it's so deeply ingrained in me. The gift to be able to say, this is where I was, but this is where I'm going to be now. The gift, the ability to be able to look at certain thoughts that creep into my psyche, and thoughts always create emotions. Every emotion is preceded by a thought, right? It says in Sefer Yetzirah, in the Tanya, and many Svarim, that emotions are called children. And the thoughts that produce them are parents. A child comes from parents. When I have an emotion, every emotion has a parent. No emotion lives in a vacuum. Every emotion has a mommy, and every emotion has a tati that brought it into existence. And those are thoughts, ideas. The thoughts are then translated into emotional energy, into an emotion. The ability to be able to transcend my vayismama and say, I am really letting go. The ability to be able to, I'm speaking as though it's easy. It's not easy. It's not easy, but it's necessary for freedom. It's necessary. Huh? Das sagen. You're doing a sneak preview here. In our own personal life, you know, the ability that Arizal put in before Kriya Shema Shalamita, to say a prayer. Some people say, Ribono shel olam, hareini moichel lechol mi shehichas v'engned. It's where the person forgives those who hurt them. That's very, very deep. I can't force somebody to forgive. I can't force myself to forgive. Sometimes I don't want to forgive because if I forgive, what's left of all my pain if I forgive? If I could continue living with that sense of justified resentment, then ich bin a mensch. The only problem is the salt now lives inside of me. Forgiveness is not just for the other person. Forgiveness is for the person themselves. It's the ability that you're not controlling my life anymore. I am not a victim in any degree or form. It happened. What happened, happened. I don't forget it. And I have to create proper boundaries, whatever that means in a person's life. But it means that my soul was not damaged. My soul was not tarnished, and I'm ready to own that type of freedom. That ownership could sometimes look like victimhood because what I'm letting go, I'm going to let you win. No, I'm going to let my soul win. I'm going to let myself win. I care too much about living the life I'm supposed to live. I care too much about living the life God wants me to live, about living a full actualized life to be able to remain in shackles by another person's ill-conceived choices, whether they did it advertently or willingly, b'shoigeg, b'mezid, b'oines, or b'ratzon, as the Arizal continues in that prayer. So here we see it in light. Light. The word light actually has different meanings, right? In Hebrew, light means a cover-up, like by Boaz. When Rus comes to Boaz Belot, she comes clandestinely. Light also means a curse. Klala, the Targum says, is levatin. And light is also a fragrance. It's a fragrance. When Yosef is being taken down the caravan, right? The Yishmaelim who are taking him on the caravan, they have different spices. One of them is light. So which is light? Is light a cover-up? Is light a curse? Or is light a fragrance? And the answer is, that's a choice I have to make. That's the choice I have to make. And then can I turn my curse into a fragrance? Can I turn that which covered me up, which caused me to go into hiding, into a source of fragrance? But it doesn't come without the struggle of the vayismama, the shalshelas. The word shalshelas means a chain. Why did they use that word for this note? Because I'm chained. You see the accuracy of it. I'm in a chain. I'm literally chained. I can't leave Zdom. I'm sorry. This is too heartbreaking for me. And you know why I'm sharing this today? This is the feeling of so many Jews today. I read 2 articles in Haaretz newspaper, which is considered radical left-wing newspaper in Israel, blaming much of the terrorist acts over decades on Israel. And two writers both write, I'm not quoting verbatim, but this is the kind of, we have created our home in the radically left-wing community. What they call in Israel, No'orut. No'orut is enlightened, the enlightened community that focuses on feminism and human rights and the underdog and wants to be tolerant to all those who are downtrodden and dejected and highlighting the right of every individual to live their life the way they see fit, to an extreme, to a radical extreme, expressing itself in almost every agenda. And we thought that this community internationally would be outraged by such atrocities committed towards children and women and elderly and men, non-combatant civilians, and not a word. Not only not a word, but 32 universities in the United States of America. And you're talking about top universities. You have to pay $60,000, $70,000 a year to get your children into them. Right? You thought yeshiva tuition was expensive? And what are you paying for? You're paying for that your children should be in an atmosphere where nobody can distinguish between good and evil, between barbarism, sadistic cruelty, and basic human decency and kindness, to the point that leaders of these universities couldn't even condemn Hamas. I heard Dennis Prager speak. This was before it happened. And he said that, in the 1950s and 60s and 70s, the Lubavitcher Rebbe used to make fun a lot of university. That American Jews feel that if their kids don't go to university, they won't be mentioned, they won't be people, they won't be gestellt, they're going to be verhakt and verquetscht. He says, I really disagreed with him about that. Because, no, it is America. If you want a good job, this is a place of higher education. He says, today I see that these are some of the most corrupt places on earth in terms of not having any moral backbone. Forget about not having a moral backbone, in terms of actually supporting abhorrent, evil behavior without anybody actually thinking, reflecting, being introspective. And what's even more shocking is how many Jews, Jewish students and Jews who were targeted, they would be the first ones to be murdered if they were there. Hamas doesn't care if you're a left-winger or a right-winger, what you wear, what you think, what you believe. And yet so many Jews, including some very famous Jews, have dedicated their lives to healing and to help people heal, and sophisticated and intelligent in so many ways. And here too, such a moral breakdown. So these two women in Haaretz write, we don't have a home anymore. We don't have a home. If you can justify rape and barbarity and torture and death and taking little babies hostages, Rahman al-Islam, what's left to the fabric of humanity? This is Loitz vayismama. This is Loitz procrastination. It's fascinating psychologically how to explain it. Maybe it's part of the trauma of Gullus. One of the deepest symptoms of trauma is that you start thinking you deserve it. Somehow, so many Jews have such a low self-esteem that many of them could cultivate a mindset where actually when such atrocities are committed towards the Jewish people, they can find it in themselves to say, what did we do to deserve it? What did we do to deserve it? The levels of self-hate, of self-shame, of self-loathing are so profound. This is what happens when you don't know who you are, when you don't know what you stand for, when one's entire education was inculcated with messages that undermined their core self. And they created a camouflage life, like in a wax museum. You create a life for yourself with a community that you think loves you, and at a moment of truth, they look at light and said, dirty Jew, get out of here. You're just a jester. You're just a joker. It's shaking Jews to the core. It's this vayismama, this shalshelas. Wow. At the end of the day, hein am levadad yishkain. But the truth is, for a Jew anchored in Yiddishkeit and for a Jew anchored in Jewish eternity and history, all this is a revelation of the power and the uniqueness of the Jewish people. As I told you in another class, when you see who hates you, you get to know who you are. May oivai techakmeni. Show me your enemy and I'll tell you who you are. When people who have no problem doing the most barbaric things in the world, and they are the ones who hate you, you're doing something right. When you look at history and you say Hitler hates you, Stalin hates you, Arafat hates you, Bin Laden hates you, Rouhani, Khomeini, the Ayatollahs in Iran, Nasrallah, Michel, all these Yamach Shemainiks hate you, Paroi, Nebuchadnezzar, Haman. Wow, what are you doing so good? What makes you so holy that they hate you? This is a time of awakening for the Jewish people, and it's an opportunity not to be missed. Be able to say, you're home. Netzach Yisrael is waiting for you. Lot was wandering and he got lost in the appeal of Sdoim. Don't get lost in the appeal of Sdoim. Embrace who you are, embrace your soul, embrace your people, embrace your homeland, embrace your destiny. There's a reason evil despises you, because this is a nation that was designated to be ambassadors of love and of light and of divinity and of morality and of hope. And when you see such irrational hatred, I'm not only talking about Hamas, I'm talking about from sophisticated professors and politicians and journalists and essayists in their protests and demonstrations, it only highlights the unique eternal role of the Jewish people to revolutionize the world and make it a Mishkan, make it a Beis HaMikdash, make it a place of peace. It shows you the revolution of the Nevi'im who spoke about Geula. La yisu goy al goy cherev, la yilmedu oid milchama, la yareyu v'la yashchisu, ki mal haaretz deis Hashem, quoting the Nevuos of Yeshaya about Geula. It teaches you who the Jewish people are, what the Jewish people are. And it reminds you also that what's happening today didn't start today. For thousands of years, somehow this group of people manages to evoke the deepest sense of disgust and hate. But why? Why? And the answer is because a nation that was chosen to be the ambassadors of goodness and love become what we might call the miners' canaries of history. I don't know, those of you who are familiar with mining, but before miners go down to mine, let's say for coal, they send down canary birds. Canary birds are very sensitive to noxious fumes. If the birds don't come back, you know there are poisonous fumes in the mines, don't go down. If the birds come back, you know it's safe. Jews are the miners' canaries of history. We are the canaries of history. Where there is evil in the world, it's attracted first. It targets first the canaries. Where Jews are targeted, you know this is a place of noxious fumes. That's why Hashem told Avraham Avinu, right when he met him the first time, those who bless you will be blessed. Those who curse you will be cursed. It's not just a promise. It's actually a barometer of history, one of the most accurate litmus tests throughout history. If you want to look at a nation and see, is this a blessed place or a cursed place? Ask one thing, do they bless Jews or do they curse Jews? In nations where they cursed Jews, they started with Jews, but they never ended with Jews. They ultimately persecuted and targeted every dissident, every minority they didn't agree with. Nations that bless Jews are blessed places. It's the litmus test of history. We're the canaries of history. And the canary is the one that's sensitive to this evil, and evil feels what is goodness. And therefore it attacks it, and it attacks it with such vicious hatred at such a point. The worst thing Jews can do is self-doubt. Can engage in self-doubt and self-loathing in a sense of an inferiority complex of weakness. Jews have mastered the ability to be able to say, Ashreinu matov chalkeinu, manoyim garleinu, mayofiru shasenu, that throughout thousands of years our dedication is one thing, to bring redemption to the world, to bring love to the world, to bring truth to the world. Or legoyim nesaticha, like Yeshaya says, to be a light unto the people. Atem Eida, he says, you're my witnesses, God says. The Greeks used to kill the witnesses. If you kill the witness, then you don't have to deal with the story. The Jews are the witnesses. They're the witnesses of a higher consciousness, of a higher morality, that the fact that there's something called truth, for heaven's sake, there's something called truth, and there's something called a lie, and there's a difference. I said one of the problems of Israel versus the Arabs have no problem just telling a story. Yeah, you bombed our hospital. It doesn't have to be grounded in reality. I can tell you right now it's 10 o'clock at night. You look at me, Hitler once said, if you say a small lie, people don't believe you. If you say a monstrous big lie, then everybody believes you. Because how can it be? Right? If you say it's a small lie, I couldn't come to the wedding because I had a flu, nobody believes you. You didn't want to come, shine. But if you tell me this big lie, right? I was in the hospital, I almost died, I had a double stroke with a triple bypass. And my father was also, and plus, I had to be in Australia. It all happened in Australia. Of course I believe you. Jews are not masters of that. They're not you just create, it doesn't have to be grounded in any reality whatsoever. Any reality whatsoever. And people get away with it. Jews don't even know how that, not everybody, a lot of Jews, they don't know how that works. How do you do that? It's what Hitler said. Don't say a small lie. Don't do that. The biggest lie whatsoever. Then it must be true. That's exactly what you're seeing now. But our comfort is Hashem Elokim Emes. Truth prevails. Reality prevails. Goodness prevails. That's why we're here today. That's why Eretz Yisrael is here today. This is a time to open the doors to every Jew and to every good person. Say, stop vayismama, stop hesitating, stop procrastinating. Know who you are, embrace who you are, and live who you are. The Jews had one weapon for 4,000 years. It accompanied us since the day we became a people, till this very day. The Torah and the mitzvahs. And in such a time, the Jewish people need to recognize that power, to be able to stay in that space of truth, of authenticity, of godliness, of kedusha, of holiness, of oneness. And of course, never ever doubt, ever, our right, and it's even embarrassing to say this, to protect ourselves, but much more than that, our obligation to eliminate such horrific evil from humanity that threatens every innocent Jew and really every innocent person. Like Hashem tells Avraham, those who bless you are blessed, those who curse you are cursed. I want to come to a second scene. Could have also been written a few days ago, but it was written around 3,300 years ago. Avraham has two children. He has two sons, Yishmael born from Hagar and Yitzchak born 13 years later or 14 years later from Sarah. If you take a look at the next source, Parshas Vayera Perek Chafal of Pasuk Tes Yud. Vateres Sarah ben Hagar HaMitzvus Asher Yoda L'Avraham Etzachik. Sarah, the mother of Yitzchak, baby Yitzchak, sees that the son of Hagar, his name was Yishmael, who came from Egypt. She was an Egyptian woman, and she became a maidservant in the house, and then Avraham had a child with her, which was Sarah's suggestion, and named him Yishmael. And she saw that this son is mitzachik. He's literally mitzachik means jesting. What does the jesting mean? What's wrong with somebody laughing? So this is where Chazal struggle a lot to understand the word mitzachik. Rashi brings, the Medrash brings different opinions, but they find in the Tanakh the word mitzachik is used for murder, it's used for adultery, and it's used for idolatry. And Yishmael was involved in all of these things. V'toymer la'Avram, she tells Avram, Garesh ha'ama hazois ve'ezbna. Expel the maidservant and her son, ki la yirash ben ha'ama hazois b'niyim Yitzchak. Because the son of this maid will not inherit together with my son, with Yitzchak. V'yomer Elokim el Avram, al Youre beinecha l'nar v'al ha'masecha, koil asher toymer elecha Sarah, shma b'koil kibitzah k'koil chazara. Hashem tells Avram, don't feel so pained about this. Whatever Sarah tells you, listen to her. This has become an eternal commandment to the first Jewish man and to every Jewish man since. Whatever she says, listen to her. She's smarter, she's wiser, she's deeper, she gets it. Okay? You don't have to quote this in my name. You could quote it in your name or in God's name. For that line, yeah, okay. Ki b'Yitzchak yikara lechazara. Yitzchak will be the one who will perpetuate your legacy. Now I want to ask a question. Sarah says he will not inherit with my son. Avraham Avinu was a very, very affluent man. We see it throughout the Chumash. Avraham Avinu was extremely, extremely successful. That's why he could be so hospitable. He was affluent. He had prosperity and plenty. Later he would be called Nasi Elokim, a prince of God. Avraham Avinu even told the king of Sodom, I don't want your money. I don't need you to tell me that you made me rich. I don't need you to tell me you made me rich. God already blessed me. Avraham Avinu was extremely successful. Already when he came back from Egypt, it said he was heavy with silver and gold and with a tremendous amount of livestock. He was an extremely successful person. So what do you care if Yishmael is going to get part of the inheritance? So Sarah is like a Yiddish mama. Okay, so you're very protective of your son Yitzchak, but so protective to the point that Yishmael can get a piece of the cake. And even if she is, because Yitzchak is her son, she wants him to have everything. Hashem actually tells Avraham Avinu, in this case, she gets it more than you. Avraham was upset. He says, listen to Sarah. But here again, when you read the pasuk carefully, you see what Sarah understood. People translate, Sarah said, send him away from the house because this son will not, lo yirash, will not, I'm not going to allow him to inherit. What Sarah was actually saying is, lo yirash, he won't be able to inherit it together with Yitzchak. She's not talking about if she will give permission or not. She's talking about the fabric and the nature of Yishmael versus Yitzchak. And here too, Sarah thousands of years ago articulated one of the most tragic mistakes that so many have made and continue to make. Some of us growing up in Western cultures of democracy, understand if you and I are fighting over a house, you say it's your house, I say it's my house, and we split the pie. We split the birthday cake. You take 50%, I take 50%, you take 70%, I take 30%. So peace is more important than me having the entire house. The future of my children, the future of our children is more important, and that's why we make compromises. Everybody thinks that logic should apply to the Middle East as well. If Israel would only give away the territories it liberated in 1967, creating a Palestinian state near an Israel state, let Yishmael have his piece of the Yerusha, and let Yitzchak have his piece of Yerusha, and everything will be beautiful. It makes beautiful sense, right? Why not? And that was the motivation behind Arik Sharon, who was the Prime Minister of Israel in 2005, who gave away the entire Gaza, and in fact, he had to forcibly expel 10,000 Jews. I was in Gush Katif before. It was like a paradise with the beaches and the greenhouses and the farms and the shuls and the infrastructure. It was built over 30 or 40 years. It was a piece of majestic beauty. Nevet Kalim and Gush Katif, what do you have, 15 or 20 communities or 25 communities? 10,000 Jews were forcibly expelled, and every last soldier was evacuated, giving the Arabs literally a paradise with an economy that was worth billions of dollars, and with international aid. Now indeed, if the next day they would lay groundworks to build hospitals and museums and universities, everybody who criticized Arik Sharon would have to say, you know what, maybe this was a good move. Wow. You gave them Gaza, you left, look what they're doing to it. It became the Singapore of the Middle East, the Hong Kong of the Middle East. Wow. And within a few years, that vision would expand to the West Bank, etc. But the next day, that day, the cemeteries were destroyed, the shuls were burned, and missiles started to fly into Israel. If Israel had seichel, and not just seichel, had the backbone, it would say, with the first missile that flew into Israel, this is over. This is too dangerous. This was the buffer zone. We now just brought the enemy, Hamastan, into our very territory. From here they can start their mini Holocaust, which they did on Simchas Torah when they were finally successful. It's over. This is what Sarah is saying. Lo yirash. Yishmael is not looking for a piece of land together with Yitzchak. He's not looking for a Palestinian state near Israel. He's looking for a Palestinian state in lieu of Israel. All these demonstrators, these Jews who demonstrate from the river to the sea, ever see? Palestine, from the river to the sea? What's the river to the sea? It basically means Auschwitz. The river to the sea includes Israel. So what happens to all the Jews there? What happens to Simchas Torah, to the Jews in northern, in near Gaza, in the south? Sarah is the most peaceful person. Sarah says, I want peace, not just for the Jews, I want peace for Yishmael too. I want peace for everybody. You have to understand the mindset. The mindset is, I don't want you here. In fact, according to the Quran, they're not allowed to have Jews owning land in that space that belongs to them. You're not allowed to. If you believe in Allah, you're not allowed to. So I impose my Western liberal ideas on the enemy, and I say, no, really, this is just a justified frustration because I didn't get my state. In 2005, you got your state? But there were checkpoints. Checkpoints means it's not a real state. But why were there checkpoints? And smart people don't know how to differentiate between a cause and an effect. If there would be no missile coming, if there would be no rocket sent, if there would be no suicide bombers, and there would be not one checkpoint, it would be like America and Canada, or even less. The whole reason there had to be this security is because of the danger. But how do people distinguish when there's no distinction between lies and truth? Absolutely no level. This is what Sarah is explaining. You have to understand the situation. You're dealing with an enemy that doesn't want to inherit with you, wants to inherit instead of you. So now you have to make a choice. Should millions of Jews live, or God forbid, surrender to those who want to destroy them? That's the choice. And the worst thing that happens with a surgery is the doctor starts to clean out the infection or the disease, and then the doctor sees blood. The doctor says, I can't deal with this, and sews it back up, and the raging cancer is left in the body to erupt a few months later or a few years later. This has been Israel's greatest mistake. And that's why Hashem tells Avraham, Koil asher tomer elecha Sarah shma b'koila. Sarah gets it. Sarah is articulating the truth. If one day you're going to have neighbors with a leadership that really respects your right to exist, you'll have peace in a week. It's not an issue. But when you're dealing with a time of war, and you're dealing with war 75 years to make these calculations, is suicide. It would be like in 1945, somebody would come to Churchill or Roosevelt, America or Britain, and say, I don't understand. How could you go into Berlin? What about democracy? How could you go into Berlin? It's not democracy. There's so many people living in Berlin. You have a Hitler who wants to destroy the entire world. Now you have to eliminate every single vestige of evil without compromise for the sake, not just of the Jews, for the sake of the Arabs, for the sake of their children too. This is what Sarah was teaching. Jews have become so intoxicated by the love for peace, which is beautiful, but often so misguided and misdirected, because peace I can only make with somebody who wants some form of coexistence, even if they don't want to be my best friend. Rabin, during the ill-conceived Oslo Accords, which literally created thousands of suicide bombers, giving them the autonomy in the West Bank, death after death, murder after murder, said peace you make with enemies, not with friends. Wrong. Peace you make with former enemies. Peace you make with former enemies. And if I compromise and I make a concession to somebody who simply doesn't know how to inherit with me, what does that show? It shows you're weak. That's what Sarah understood. If I give you half of the cake, what do you say? I'm kind? Yishmael says, you're weak. I put pressure, I got half of the cake. You know what it means? I can get the whole cake. That's all it means. Churchill said appeasement is feeding the crocodile in the hope you will be eaten last. So I give you the cake and you say, wow, I can get all of it. That's the mindset. Every time Israel conceded territory, even negotiated to concede territory, it unleashed waves and waves of terror, rivers of blood, without one exception. Sarah understood this better than anybody else. And she said, you have to understand how Yishmael looks at the world. You have to understand how Yishmael looks at Yitzchak. At this point in history, there's only one way you can create peace for both sides. And then we come to a third scene. The last scene we're going to be exploring. And it's very disturbing at first glance, because it happens 3 times. Avraham and Sarah travel to foreign countries. And when they come in, Avraham asks Sarah to say that she's not married to him. She's his sister. This is a brother and sister going touring. He does it the first time in Egypt. They come to Egypt and Sarah claims she's his sister. She's not his wife. Avraham is afraid if she says the truth that she's the wife, they're going to kill the husband because they're going to want to take her. But if she's a sister, they'll actually be nice to the brother and take her. You would see, okay, say it happened once. In Parshas Lech Lecha, in Vayera, it happens again, this time in Gaza. They're actually in Gaza. They go to Gaza. It's under the Philistine rule. And by the way, the Romans, when they destroyed the second Bais HaMikdash, they wanted to add insult to injury. So they changed the name from Judea to Palestine because of the Philistine, the Plishtim that were there in Eretz Yisrael in the ancient times to add insult to injury. They also tried to change the name of Jerusalem to Ayala Capitalana, but that didn't work. But Palestine stuck. This is from a Roman name to remind us of the Plishtim. So when Avraham and Sarah come to Gaza, the Plishtim lived in Gaza, in the south. Once again, Sarah and Avraham maintain that they're brothers and sisters. And this is this scene, Vayera, Parag, Chav, Pasuk, Yud, Aleph. Vayemer Avraham, they said, why, the king says, why do you lie to me? He says, I said there is no fear of God in this place. You're going to kill me because of my wife. In a place where there's no fear of God, temptation can prevail very easily. And therefore, I had no choice. Indeed, she's my sister, the daughter of my father, not the daughter of my mother. And she became my wife. Rashi says it was actually the granddaughter of his father because Sarah was his niece. It came to pass when Hashem caused me to wander from my father's house. I said to her, to Sarah, this is your kindness which you shall do with me. To any place that we come, please say about me, he is my brother. Wow. So it happens twice with Avraham and Sarah. We think it's over. Parshas told us, Yitzchak does exactly the same thing. Once again, he's traveling with Rivka to Gaza. They go to a place called Gerar, under the domain of the Philistines in Gaza, and sure enough, they present themselves as brother and sister, and then Avimelech, the king, figures out that they're actually husband and wife. He looks out through the window, and he confronts Yitzchak and says again, why did you lie to me? And once again, Yitzchak says, this is how we do it. So it's funny, you have 3 times the same story. Avraham twice with Sarah, Avraham and Sarah twice, and Yitzchak and Rivka once. Parshas Lech Lecha, Parshas Vayera. It's like a common theme. It's the most common thing in their lives. You come somewhere, you're my sister, I'm your brother. Great arrangement. We thought it only happened 3 times. Actually, Avraham Avinu tells the king here, and he says, I asked Sarah and say, please, this is your kindness. Kol hamakim, wherever we go. So I don't know how many times it happened. Wherever they traveled, we're brothers and sisters. So of course there's the moral dilemma, which the Mefarshim discuss at length. You want to save your life, okay, so that's why you just give up. So you're going to say you're the brother, so they don't have to kill you in order to take her. What about her? Right, the Ramban says Avraham Avinu committed a great folly, a great chata, chet gadol b'shgaga. He great that he did it, that he just subjected his wife to be taken to fire. The Zohar says something interesting. The Zohar says there was a reason Avraham didn't argue with God when God said, whatever Sarah says, listen to her. Avraham Avinu knew that Sarah's stature was much greater than his. It was fine, easy for him to listen to her. Like Rashi says, when it came to prophecy, the matriarchs were superior to the patriarchs. The Imayas were greater than the Avos. So the Zohar said that Avraham and Yitzchak completely were not concerned about their wives. They knew that there's a spiritual aura or halo, a spiritual halo that will protect them, and therefore Sarah and Rivka will come out unscathed, which indeed Sarah came out unscathed from Parai and from the Philistines, and the same is true with Rivka. They were worried about themselves. So they asked their wives, do us a favor and say that we're brothers so that they won't kill us. We don't have that same spiritual guardian angel or protection that you may have. But still we have to understand, okay, however you're going to explain how they had a right to do it, why is there such a common theme? And the Torah, every story, Avraham lived for 175 years, right? We don't have stories of 175 years. We have 6, 7 stories about him, 8 stories. The same as with Yitzchak, we have 3 stories about him. Because it's not every story was recorded. 40 years in the desert, how many stories are recorded? It's the stories that are relevant for eternity. Torah comes from the word Vayera, which means it's a blueprint for life. What's the blueprint here? That I should start wherever I go, say my wife is my sister and I'm her brother? What's the lesson here? This is a beautiful insight, one homiletical insight. It's in a sefer called Divrei Bina that was written by the first Biala Rebbe. Name was Reb Yitzchak Yaakov Rabinowitz. He was named after the Yid HaKadosh from Pshischa. One of the great Hasidic masses was the Yid HaKadosh, Rabbi Yaakov Yitzchak Rabinowitz. And his grandson, a great-grandson, was known as the first Biala. Biala is a city in Poland. He passed away in 1905. And he has a Hasidic work called Divrei Bina, the words of understanding. He was one of the great spiritual leaders and sages of his day in Poland, in Biala, Rabbi Yitzchak Yaakov Rabinowitz. And he says a very beautiful line. He says, Chazal say, Maisa Avos Siman Labanim. What happened with the Avos is always a signpost, a blueprint for all the children. Avimelech asks Avram, why did you say she's my sister? So he could have said, I was afraid to be killed. There's no fear of God here. If there's no fear of God, there's no morality. You have no problem murdering somebody in order to take their wife. Okay, that's an explanation. But then he goes into this whole Torah. He says, when God took me away from the house of my father, and I was wandering all over the place, then I turned to my wife and I said, I need the chesed from you. And what's the chesed? Wherever we go, say you're my brother. It's very interesting. Why does the Philistine king have to know about the personal agreement that Avraham made with Sarah? And he says, Maisa Avos Siman Labanim. Avraham was talking to him, and he was talking to all of his children forever. And he said like this nation is going to go through a lot of journeys. And you're going to go into many terrains and many places where life may be very difficult. What is going to allow you to be able to survive? What is going to allow you to endure and to emerge intact, to emerge with your wholesomeness and with your full splendor and light? And the answer is, you're going to turn to each other and say, Zeh chazdei asher taseh imadi. There's a kindness that I want you to do with me. Any place we ever go, Imri li achihu. Look at me and say, you're my brother. And Avraham Avinu here was giving the Jewish people the recipe for eternal endurance. As you will go from country to country, from land to land, over thousands of years, when you will see that other Jew, look at him and say, you're my brother. Look at her and say, you're my sister. And that's why he says, as we wandered, as we had to relocate, struggle with so many different challenges, face adversity every step of the way, what is going to allow us to avoid all of the pitfalls, physical, emotional, psychological, social, and spiritual? And the answer is, wherever we go, Imri li achihu. Say that you're my brother. What is Avraham Avinu saying here? Avraham Avinu here is articulating one of the most powerful and potent messages in Jewish history. The fact is that for most of our history we have been wandering. Most of our history, most Jews haven't been living in Eretz Yisrael. In a few years, history will be made by the fact that more than half of the Jewish people will be living in Eretz Yisrael, which didn't happen since the days of Shlomo HaMelech. Once the 10 tribes were exiled, never was there more than a small percentage of the Jewish people. Even in the time of the second Beis HaMikdash, only 42,000 Jews made Aliyah with Ezra and Nehemiah to rebuild the second Beis HaMikdash. Now there are 6.6 million Jews living in Israel, and that number should be recognized, 6.6 million, Ken Yerbu. In a few years, Be'ezer Hashem, we're going to have more than half of Klal Yisrael. Hopefully Mashiach will come far earlier, so only half will be all of Klal Yisrael, more than half. How do you survive this? Most nations, when exiled to countries where they became the minority, without a political and military infrastructure to maintain national identity, they forfeited their identity within a few generations. That's the normal way of things. In 1989, the Dalai Lama called in a few Jews, and he says, I've been exiled from Tibet by the Chinese since 1959. How am I supposed to maintain my identity in foreign culture and foreign soil? So he called Jews to find out how they did it. Imagine the Dalai Lama wanted to know from the Jews how 2,000 years outside of their land, millions of Jews, how they managed to secure their identity. And after 2,000 years in exile, miracles of miracles, millions of Jews returned to an ancient homeland, to Eretz Yisrael, and made the desert bloom, despite all of the dangers and despite all of the obstacles. This was the trail, this was the path that was trailblazed by Avraham and Sarah and by Yitzchak and Rivka. And that's why it's such a common story. Because I said to her, this is your kindness. Wherever we go, say, he's my brother, she's my sister. This is what will protect you. That throughout history, when you see another Jew, don't just look at them and shrug shoulders, but actually be able to look at another Jew and say, you're my sister. You're my brother. A Jew should be able to look at another Jew, whether you're my family or not my family, whether I knew you, I didn't know you, and the natural, organic state Avraham Avinu says is, say, he's my brother, she's my sister. In other words, we may have grown up hundreds of miles apart from each other, sometimes thousands of miles. Jews come from different perspectives and different walks of life. Jews certainly have disagreements, and I don't think all the disagreements are going to dissipate in the next few months. But, imri li achihu, we're brothers, we're sisters. So we naturally love each other, we care for each other, we respect each other. We're one, we're family, we share the same genes, the same DNA, the same soul. We're here for each other through thick and thin. Yes, there are different levels of observance, there are different categories, there are different demographics, different perspectives. But our souls are literally interconnected like siblings in one family. That is the truth of the Jewish people that Avraham and Sarah and Yitzchak and Rivka articulated in the first generation. And today, in such a time of crisis, and the Jewish people are facing crisis, you could feel it, you could feel the power of it. And don't underestimate the power in it. You could feel the outcry of every single Jew who has a beating heart towards what occurred in Eretz Yisrael. You could feel the outcry of support and help. Everyone feels that they want to be drafted into this war for survival according to their capacity, according to their ability. You could feel it in the sense of camaraderie and brotherhood and sisterhood. You can feel the oneness. And it's a very, very comforting thought, because when you live in a world that looks at this with such apathy and indifference and can even protest Israel and support Hamas, Avraham Avinu said, don't forget your brothers and sisters. This is what's going to help you not only survive, what's going to help you thrive. And this is the time now. This is the time. A new level of Achdus Yisrael has emerged. It's a fact. We can look at it as superficial, but it's not true. The opposite is the superficial. The divisions are superficial. The fragmentation is superficial. Yes, there are divisions. In Israel just a few months ago, there was a talk about two separate nations. With all the demonstrations about the judicial overhaul, there were people who spoke about two nations living in Israel. And suddenly, within a few hours, Simchas Torah in the morning, Tovshin Pei Daled, we realized not only we're one nation, but that we're actually one. The Jewish people is one neshama that's manifested in many different bodies. That's a strength that is extraordinary. That is a strength that's powerful. For this, we have to be able to be free, to have free souls, so we could feel who we really are. That when I look at another Jew, I could really say, you're my brother. You're my sister. And that's the truest thing. Imri li achiyu, wherever we go, kol hamakom, wherever you go, you're my brother, you're my sister. With a brother and sister, you can have a disagreement. Brothers and sisters fight, especially when they're babies. Hopefully not when they're older. But in the house, brothers and sisters are made. It's part of raising children. But a brother and sister, it's a brother and sister. It's a bond of blood. It's essential. It's intrinsic. That's the truth of the Jewish people. That Barcheinu Avinu Kolonu Ke'echad Ba'er Panecha. That creates a fortress that's not breachable. I told you maybe once, if you ever go to San Francisco, there are sequoia trees, redwoods, some of them are 3,000 or 4,000 years old. So you look at a tree, it's been around before Moshe Rabbeinu was born. Not bad. It's been around the times of Yosef, of Mesushelach, of Noach. It's pretty good. You're looking at this tree, and scientists wanted to understand, how do these redwoods, sequoias they're called, how did they survive thousands of years? You have forest fires. You have hurricanes, you have storms, and you have the infections and bacteria and viruses before Corona. How did these trees survive? So they thought that the roots must go so deep to be able to weather every storm. But in recent years, when they developed the technology, they noticed that the roots don't go deep. In fact, sequoias have shallow roots. Some of them 4 or 5 feet. It's not deep at all. And then they realized what they lack in depth, they make up in breadth. And what I mean is, when a sequoia tree's roots begin to develop, it searches to be able to find its place and get the water and nutrients it needs. When it meets the roots of another sequoia, they interlock with each other. They literally join forces, and you can have 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 100 sequoia trees. On top of the surface, each one is distinct. But if you go down, the roots are interlocked, interlaced, interconnected, integrated with each other like one tree. No storm can destroy that. A storm can destroy 1 tree, 2 trees. When you have trees so interlocked, nobody can destroy it. So what they make up in depth, what they lack in depth, they make up in breadth. And I'm looking at them and I'm thinking, we are the sequoias of history. On top of earth, on top of the surface, every tree is different. It's supposed to be different. It has its personality, its flavor, its chemistry, its DNA, its idiosyncrasies, its unique quality and flavor. And it's supposed to be that way. The Mishnah says their opinions are not the same, their faces are not the same, people are not supposed to be the same. If not, God would tell us to get married to ourselves. People are not supposed to be the same. On top of the surface, every tree has its own uniqueness, and it should maintain its uniqueness. But under the surface, you go on a deeper level, a subterranean level. If you go into the oimek, amuk, if you go into the depth, mamish oneness. And oneness doesn't mean no different personalities, but it means there's a sense of oneness and trust and connection and camaraderie. That is what allowed the trees to survive. That's what Avraham Avinu says. That any place we go, look at me and say, my brother. There's a beautiful interpretation of Rabbi Yitzchak of Barditchev. Rabbi Yitzchak of Barditchev, it says in Shir Hashirim, the last source, Perik Aleph, Pasuk Zayin, the Song of Songs, Hagida li sha'av anafshi. Tell me you whom my soul loves. Rabbi Yitzchak of Barditchev, the great master, said, and is quoted in a sefer called Tiferes Uziel by Rabbi Israel Meislish, who was a student of the Maggid of Mezrich and a friend, and he says, I heard it from Rabbi Yitzchak of Barditchev. He says, you have to interpret it this way. Hagidali, please tell me, sha'av nafshi, that you love my soul. Not Hagidali shava nafshi. Tell me you whom my soul loves. Tell me whatever I want you to tell me. Hagidali, tell me, sha'av nafshi. Sometimes, I'm sitting with somebody, you're sitting with somebody, and there is a lack of communication. Deep down, what they're saying is, Hagidali, before we can talk, before I can trust, before we could connect, tell me, Hagidali, tell me, Zagmir, that Selmir, tell me, Sha'av nafshi, that you have Ava to my soul. It's what our children need more than anything else. I want to educate my child. I want to discipline my child. I want to fine-tune my child. I want to raise my child. But first and foremost, my child needs to know, tell me, sha'av nafshi. And I don't mean only say it with words. Hagidali, tell me with your soul, tell me with your most genuine presence. Tell me sha'ava nafshi. Tell me, make me feel that you love me. Make me feel that you believe in me. Make me feel that you cherish me. This is what a wife needs from a husband. This is what a husband needs from a wife. This is what we need from each other. Hagidali sha'ava nafshi. Tell me what, because once I can feel it, once I can feel that you love me, once I can feel you're a source of love, then I'll be open to everything. And if I can't feel that, then ultimately I'm creating defense mechanism and putting on, bulletproof, emotionally bulletproof us. Hagidali sha'ava nafshi. Well, today we live in a time, that this is the great power of the Jewish people. Hagidali sha'ava nafshi, imrina li achihu. To be able to hold on to that place of true connection, true Avos Yisrael, true Achdus. It doesn't mean Jews shouldn't have disagreements, chas v'shalom. We wouldn't be Jewish anymore. But it does mean that Avraham and Sarah and Yitzchak and Rivka are first fathers and mothers. Literally, this is the story that repeats itself. You're a brother and a sister through thick and thin. Never detach, never separate, never allow hate, discord, contention, politics to tear people apart, to tear families apart, to tear the nation apart, to tear Israel apart, to tear the community apart. That's the koyach of the Jewish people. It's the eternal power. Sfas Emes once said, Shaloi echad bilvad amad aleinu l'chaleseinu. It doesn't only mean not one nation tried to kill. Shaloi echad bilvad. It's the lack of echad that amad aleinu l'chaleseinu. The loy echad bilvad, the lack of echad. That's what amad aleinu l'chaleseinu. Because it runs contrary to who we are. We are a nation that represents love and oneness in the whole world. How does it begin? It begins internally with ourselves and with our loved ones. And that also means that in today's day, when there's such a arousal, a spiritual arousal among the Jewish people, coupled with uncertainty, coupled with trepidation, coupled with concern and worry. As I said in a previous class, we were all drafted into an army. You just have to figure out which division you're in. An army has different divisions. Not everybody can take a gun and go to the front line. Not everybody is supposed to. I have to ask, which division did the Ribbono Shel Olam draft me into? Which division did he draft you into in this battle? But whatever division we are, we're in one army, Tzivos Hashem. And today, when there's a search of so many Jews to be able to hold on to something, to be able to be anchored in something eternal, there's a tremendous opportunity and a schus and a privilege on every person finding their own sphere of influence to be able to influence Jews in a positive way, to strengthen their relationship with Hashem. V'atem hadveikim b'Hashem Elokeichem Chaim kol chamayim. The relationship with that which is the source of all energy, the source of all blessing, the source of all love, the source of all power. When you live in a nation, we live with such a small people, but an eternal people and a historic people. And over the generations, so many have become estranged and so many have become alienated. But this is a time that Jews are looking, and everyone has a sphere of influence to inspire Yidden to be able to come closer to learning of Torah, to the celebration of mitzvahs, to mitzvahs on a daily basis, on a weekly basis, in their home, in their community. But this is an opportunity not to forfeit in the depth of darkness. There's an opportunity for a Jewish renaissance that is unprecedented, a Jewish renaissance that can create and blow in a new sense of inspiration and empowerment in the Jewish people. An Am HaNetzach, a nation of eternity that is anchored in eternity. May we all see victory, and may we mainly see, when we all see massive victory, and may we see a complete geula very speedily in our days. B'mheira b'yameinu mamash. Thank you. Next week we have a class, Tuesday 9:30. Have a beautiful day and a beautiful week. Thank you for bringing such a chashuv guest. Thank you for coming.
I have 6 great nephews who are in
6. Wow, 6.
Yeah.
Wow.
And, you know what the boys call each other in Cheshvan now? Achi.
Really?
Everyone.
Wow.
Yes.
Wow. That's what they told you?
I saw it.
Wow.
How they refer to each other.
They call each other Achi. Wow. Okay. Okay. Baruch Shekivanti. Yes, regards, yeah. And your brother-in-law. They came for Shabbos. I was there 2 weeks ago, yeah. Yeah.
That's a short thing that's really important. Many of us say, like you were saying, every emotion has a thought process. Very often it's subconscious. I feel like we're all saying that Israel has the right to defend itself. I feel like it's very wrong.
You feel what?
When we all say that Israel has the right to defend itself, it's wrong. Because what's the thought process when you hear Israel has the right to defend itself? If somebody has a right, it implies that there's a choice.
Right.
And then what happens?
Oh, you wrote to me, yeah. Very good.
And I think it's very important for all of us
Yeah. It's a corrupt statement.
that we only say Israel's a moral
You don't have a right to defend yourself. You have an obligation to defend yourself. You have an obligation that children. Yeah. Very good.
And I think we all need to change just a little word
Very good.
to
Not the right to defend yourself, the obligation, the moral duty. Yeah. It's a moral duty. If not, you endanger innocent people.
you're part of the murder.
You're you're an accomplice of evil. Mazel tov, mazel tov. I sent a good representative. I sent a good representative to the Simcha. You're welcome. Hatzlacha Rabbah. We should hear good news. Huh? You said, mention. Dr. Grossman, thank you for coming. Dr. Grossman, it's an honor to have you. Thank you for coming. Thank you. Thank you.
Makes such a difference. And I got a lot from what you said this morning. So thank you. And when things are back to normal, maybe,
Yes, we have to. It's important. We can't forget the other battles, right? Unfortunately.
it's all part of the
It's all part of it. Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Call it evil. I wasn't calling it evil for many years, and now I do. People really love it. Anyway, thank you. Hashem should give you co-op to do
Amen.
everything that you're doing.
Gamatem, and thank you for being on the front lines. When the Rebbe told you to go to medical school,
Yeah,
I guess he saw what you're going to have to deal with the whole transgender.
yeah, well, whatever. Yeah. All right.
It's an honor to have you. Thank you for gracing us. It was a pleasant surprise. Okay, thank you. I'll shut it off.